Department committee reports, non-action items. 12A is update on El Paso County's CARES funding. Nikki Simmons, County Controller. Ms. Simmons.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Nikki Simmons, County Controller. I am here this afternoon, to present to you an update on the CARES funding that El Paso County has received in a proposed budget from the administration office to how we propose on spending that funding. So a little bit of this will be repetitive from what we talked about before. Just as a reminder, the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. It was a $2.2 trillion package. So when we talk about CARES money, we're not just talking about the coronavirus local government relief funds. When we talk about use the CARES funding, there's a lot more in CARES than the CRF or the coronavirus state and local government relief funding. It also included $454 billion for federal lending, $367 billion for small business loans, $150 billion for hospital grants. This is also the same act that allowed for the individual stimulus payments to be sent to individual taxpayers. And the $1,200 per adult, $500 per child, subject to some limits. It also is the same act that increased the weekly unemployment benefits by $600 additional per week, up to 13 weeks. So, and the reason I repeat that is because I want to make sure it's clear that when we look at the funding that El Paso County received, there was already funding that went to individual assistance, business assistance, the SBA, the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program. There was a lot of things that already happened for economic stimulus. And then these funds were intended for state and local governments to be able to respond to the emergency. So as a quick reminder, there were 3 items that we were asked to certify to, that these expenditures are necessary due to COVID, that they were not included in our most recent budget, and that they were incurred from a period from March 20th, and we have to spend the funds by December 30th of this year. So again, I'll reiterate that these funds are designed to allow governments to respond to COVID-19 and are primarily for the direct expenses of state and local governments. They cannot be used to offset lost revenues, and we did get direction that they can be used to fund employees who are doing a function substantially different than the original budget for their position. So if you had an employee who was in finance, say, and we redirected them to help with public health issues, just because we originally budgeted them for them to be in finance, this fund does allow for those employees to be paid for from CARES dollars because they're not doing what they originally were intended to do in the budget. As a reminder, here is how we have allocated the funds. The Board of County Commissioners voted on this a couple weeks ago, and we are making progress in doing the IGAs for each jurisdiction. We have sent to Colorado Springs their $37.5 million and are currently working with all other jurisdictions on their IGAs, and we'll bring those forward to the Board of County Commissioners for approval. And before I get into the budget, I just wanted to reiterate our commitment to transparency. I think being transparent with these funds is incredibly important, and obviously direction that we've received from our Board of County Commissioners to be as transparent as humanly possible with these funds. So what our plan is at this point is, but the funds are being tracked in a completely separate business unit in the budget office so that no other funds can be commingled. It'll be very clear how we spent the entire $125 million. Detailed monthly reports will be published on budget's website by vendor and by, if it's personnel reimbursement, what department we were reimbursing personnel for. And monthly, we are asking our subrecipients, which are the local municipalities which we're sharing our funding with, to give us a detailed listing of their expenditures, and we will also publish those on that budget website we have set up. In addition to that, on a monthly basis, we will report to the Board of County Commissioners in our regular monthly updates of where we are at in spending those funds. So next I'll go through our plans of how El Paso County is going to spend the $84 million that we retained. And the priority of those are response, resiliency, and recovery. So everything that we're doing is either, we're trying to respond to the event, we're trying to ensure that El Paso County remains resilient and recovers from this crisis. So overall, here is a list of $57.9 million of identified needs in every department that had needs. Overall, the largest allocations are going to economic and workforce development. And I think that that's substantial, knowing that there was no requirement in these funds to do business relief grants, things like that. And I do have Crystal Latier here from the Economic Development Department to speak to that when the time comes when we get into the details of each area. But our largest allocation is going to economic and workforce development. Also, public safety would be next. The sheriff's office, the coroner's office, emergency management, and our district attorney. All of those are law enforcement related and have significant needs due to COVID-19. So I won't go through this right now because we'll kind of go through it in detail with the next things. But you'll notice that we only added up to $57.9 million. We are strategically keeping up $26.5 million in reserves for many things. One, this is an evolving situation every day. New things come up. We don't know what a possible second wave looks like. We don't know what the end of this year looks like, and we want to make sure that we're in position to respond appropriately. We have reserved money aside for possible other allocations to different communities if a need comes up that we're not aware of, as well as obviously the estimates that we're going to go through here in a minute are estimates. And so if there's changes in those estimates, we need some money to not have a project stall. And then also we consistently hear that there's possible changes in the allowable uses and we might get additional guidance from the Treasury. So we are overall reserving money for those 4 major items. In the detail, some of these we'll spend some more time on than others, but wanted to go through each project with the Board of County Commissioners. The Assessor's Office has identified a need of doing an electronic appeals process, which would keep people from having to come in, meet with hearing officers, things like that. And so the total amount he has requested is $200,000. The clerk and recorder is going to have significant needs to run the elections. With COVID-19, our normal election process does not work for social or physical distancing. Voting tends to be, lines, and if you're not doing it via mail, and we need to make sure we have appropriate physical distancing. So that's going to require things like renting voter service and polling centers, additional drop boxes, and obviously keeping our election judges safe with PPE. So he's requested $500,000 for that. Also, the clerk and recorder's office has some of the largest customer-facing areas. You go to your DMV for a lot of transactions, and we want to keep those staff safe, as well as the customers safe from staff. So we have ordered plexiglass barriers for them. As well as there is significant need to catch up on DMV transactions for the time the DMVs were not publicly open. While they were still open for all online things, there are a lot of transactions the clerk's office is requesting, or the clerk's office is behind on due to those citizens not coming for service. So there will be need to catch up on those hours. So a total of $850,000 allocated for the clerk and recorder. Our county attorney's office has a similar issue with a backlog due to courts being closed. So $20,000 for outside counsel services to help through that. $10,000 for AV equipment to facilitate remote hearings. Summer staff, internal, just temporary staff for Human Services Division to help with the backlog of cases. $25,000 for paperless work office or work process, and $10,000 for office relocation to allow for greater physical distancing, for a total of $79,000 for our county attorney. Our coroner has requested $75,000 for PPE for his medical examiners. Unfortunately, this does include things like additional body bags that were not budgeted to begin with. Our Community Services Division, parks. Our parks have seen a lot of use the last couple months, use that we didn't plan on. We're thrilled people are using our parks, but things are going to need to be changed. Automatic restrooms, water bottles, the paint mines. The trail maintenance of the paint mines is going to be a big issue this year with how many people we're seeing out there. So just a little over $1 million for parks. Our Recreational and Cultural Services Division for the Nature Center just needs things to keep people safe, sanitization stations, crowd control belts, things like that for $16,500. Similar ideas for Veteran Services, $20,000, and a relocation of the CH2 extension to allow for additional physical distancing of $50,000 for a total of just under $1.1 million for community services. Our district attorney's office has requested $730,000. That is similar to the backlog of cases with the courts being closed for so long and with jury trials starting up here next month, I believe. The DA's office has a need for temporary, and these are all temporary, interns and DAs to catch up on the workload, as well as a touchless fingerprinting system. Didn't know a better way to put this into the budget, and so we just called them county-wide. They are the overall, across the county, things that are going to cost money, but it's kind of hard to parse them out to specific departments because they're all kind of in an internal service fund. We anticipate about $5.5 million of our current staffing that is going to be redeployed over the course of the year to COVID-19 response. We are also, if you've been in any of our larger buildings, doing staffing for symptom checking stations as we're required to under the orders, where staff take their temperature, make sure that we're not letting staff in the buildings who might be positive for COVID-19. That contract we estimate through the end of the year to be $100,000. We have a need to expand our clinic lobby at CSC for the employee health clinic. And that, with some redesign of the Pikes Peak Workforce Center area that we would be taking over, would be about $600,000. In addition, unfortunately, we will see additional costs in the workers' compensation area and medical and the self-insurance fund. Terribly, we lost a deputy earlier this year, and that has an impact on our workers' compensation fund, as well as increased medical expenses when we see our staff going to the hospital and the doctor for COVID-19 related items. And we are allowed to use the CRF funds to pay for that. As well as there was significant changes in the, I think it's the Families First Corona Relief Act. It's basically the sick time that was created by the government in response to COVID, as well as paid FMLA, and any costs associated with those can be reimbursed through the coronavirus funds. So economic development, and I would love for Crystal to come down and talk specifically to these. I think these are crucial to understand the plan in these. The first one I can talk to, staffing and equipment to handle and monitor the grants. There's going to be a lot of grants going out through economic development, which we're very excited about. And so that's $150,000. SBDC has requested $50,000 for increased consultants to be able to do their trainings for small businesses. And then the other items, the larger items, I would love for Crystal to talk to. So.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Crystal Latier, El Paso County Economic Development. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to these items. As Nikki mentioned, and as all of you know, COVID-19 has created a very severe economic disruption to our community. We're very thankful that this funding allows for some flexibility for us to do direct business relief. So as you will note there, the first line item that Nikki did not speak to was the Fulfill the Enterprise Zone Business Relief Grants. About a month ago, our department worked with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, or OEDIT, our state Office of Economic Development, to stand up a unique program known as the Pikes Peak Enterprise Zone Business Relief Fund. Why this is unique is it was a new program that we had approved by the state, and it was stood up as a model across the state. It allowed us to stand up infrastructure and take private resident donations to help with business relief. Those donations will then receive a 25% state income tax credit. Since we already had that infrastructure stood up, it was wonderful that we have that program up and running so that we could almost immediately deploy this funding directly to businesses. So that first line item there speaks to fulfilling those requests from that program, and you'll likely see later this week announcements regarding the number of businesses and the grant amounts that will be going out to the community. Additionally, we've continued to hear that relief funding has not been accessible for our 501c6s nor our 501c4s with economic development-driven missions. Why this is important is because these are our local chambers, chambers of commerce, business league organizations, and entities like the Downtown Partnership, who've continued to be incredible economic development partners and provide relief training and other business and education services, things that we will need moving forward forward as we get on with economic recovery in our region. So you'll see later this week, we will stand up a competitive application process for these entities to access some of this funding. Again, it'll all be related directly to their response to COVID-19 and how they're helping the business community continue to recover. And then lastly, you'll see there a large amount dedicated to other business and economic development relief grants. In addition to the Pikes Peak Enterprise Zone program, there were 2 other infrastructure programs stood up in our region for local funding, ones you've probably heard of, Survive and Thrive, which presented a loan opportunity, and then the Downtown Partnership also did grant opportunities for local downtown businesses. Our hope is, and we've continued to have great collaborative conversations with these entities, that we use those 3 infrastructures that are currently stood up to vet the application and evaluation process through those. That way, we will be provided with a list of recommendations on businesses that need funding, and the county can provide that relief directly to businesses. Why this is a win for all is we're using current infrastructure, we're taking a collaborative and comprehensive approach to the region, and we're allowing that subrecipient piece to be removed. Essentially, we're working with these entities, but not requiring that the federal funds be passed through as a subrecipient to another entity, working collaboratively to come up with those business recommendations and have the county provide that relief funding directly to businesses, which is allowable under this act.
So a couple of questions on that.
Sure.
What are the 3 entities? Survive and Thrive?
Survive and Thrive, which is through Exponential Impact, the Downtown Partnership through their DDA component of their program provided grant assistance to the downtown businesses, and then Enterprise Zone, which was stood up within our office. Our hope moving forward is that this relief will continue to be done in the form of grants. That has been expressed. I'm sorry.
So how many of those dollars are you going to allow Survive and Thrive to cover versus the Enterprise Zone?
Sure.
Versus the Downtown Partnership?
Great question. So we continue to work with those entities to develop our next step will be, what were the gaps? Okay, we all have this great economic data now that we've put the money out. We saw what the request was, what was the need, where are the gaps that are needed? And then we will ask those entities to provide a list of recommendations depending upon those gaps. Well, this will likely be a phased approach. For instance, perhaps we say, this week we're doing this specific industry or this specific region of our county, but taking a strategic approach, because we've continued to have a conversation that economic recovery is long-term. This is a marathon. We know that these funds need to be out by December, but how are we going to strategically approach this for different sectors and potentially different waves that may happen?
And so, yeah, and I'll get you just one second, Commissioner Williams. So do we have any county person that's on one of these committees? Obviously, we do for the enterprise zones,
right.
But for Survive and Thrive and for downtown partnerships?
So not directly from our office, but we're looking at almost setting up a hybrid structure. So we'll work closely with those entities. Also, the Economic Recovery Council through the chamber that has been stood up. There's several subcommittees. So there's a small business subcommittee, which our office participates in, as well as these other 2 offices. So recommendations through that subcommittee could likely bubble up too.
Okay, so I spoke with some folks at Survive and Thrive.
Sure.
And I believe that you need to be on that committee, the board, whatever
Sure.
it is that's going to make those decisions on applications. And it seemed to me that they were very agreeable to doing
Right.
that. I also believe that's the case with, should be the case with the downtown partnership as well.
Right.
So I'd like to see those things happen before
Sure.
we agree to filter dollars through those entities. Commissioner Williams?
So my question is to make sure that this gets out to all businesses in the county. So I know that we have opportunity zones and we have enterprise zones, and then I assume the downtown partnership will be looking at downtown businesses.
Correct.
I don't know if Survive and Thrive is only looking at a certain industry, but what about gosh, Biaggi's on Briargate Parkway. Everybody considers it to be a very wealthy restaurant, but it's a restaurant, and I'm sure they've been affected as much as anyone else in this economy, and they shouldn't have to join the chamber or pay downtown partnership fees or be part of Survive and Thrive to have access to this money.
Yes, I completely agree. The Survive and Thrive infrastructure is set up region-wide, so there are no geographic boundaries like the enterprise zone, which is distress criteria, as you previously mentioned. And please know that we are in continued conversations with these organizations, and we know that the hybrid approach will ensure that it is a completely collaborative and comprehensive process, and that all our outlying areas are very well represented. And that could be in the form of us asking for specific recommendations, with specific percentages. Okay, we want to focus on Fountain, or a specific percentage from Fountain, or this area. So there's a lot of flexibility as we continue to develop this hybrid model, but I'm encouraged that the three infrastructure and the staff, as Commissioner Waller noted, are committed to working collaboratively with the county, and so I think we will see some great results from this.
Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate also all this great work, and I'm really, really glad to see these millions of dollars that are not, continue to help our community. This is absolutely the right thing for our county to do. I also want to make a point between Survive and Thrive, Downtown Partnership, and Enterprise Zones. They are, I think, uniquely positioned for us to strengthen our partnerships and our interaction with those.
Correct.
Because all three of those also have opportunities for private industry or private citizens to contribute. Right. I know the Downtown Partnership does that, and they've got a program already ongoing. I know Survive and Thrive has vetted, I think it's 70 or more companies that they've already been through a review process with their board that they just were unable to raise enough money to cover all of them, but they raised over $2 million privately. So that's really valuable. And then, of course, the Enterprise Zone, people can contribute to that through existing statute in a private way and get tax benefits from that. So all three of these have this, what I think is a really strong connection between private funding and public funding and getting these funds out into the community. So actually I'm pretty happy to hear that those are three, not the only ones, but the
Right.
three big ones that we're going to be working with.
Yes, yeah, I concur because.
Oh, and I'm sorry, one last thing
Sure.
is the component also for the 501c4s and 6s. One of the things that chambers do is they help companies. So
Right.
providing them resources, allowing them to do their job is a great way, I think, to multiply the investment and get us to a place where we can deliver a lot more value to our companies so that they can survive through this. So thank you for that as well.
Yes, and I concur with both those points. In addition, the SBDC, for the Pikes Peak Enterprise Zone Business Relief Program, we've partnered very closely with the SBDC because we know funding a lot alone will not help us recover. So the access to business support services through agencies like SBDC or our chambers are also a vital component to recovery. So those partnerships are very important. And as you mentioned, all three of these programs have the component for the infusion of private capital, which is important as well. Who knows what federal funding will continue on or how long that recovery will take. But if we continue to develop these relationships and this infrastructure, we have the possibility to have longstanding financial business support programs in our region.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, so I did appreciate that this is going to be the largest pot of money because there are so many people in need. So the two things I've been mentioning the last several weeks is timeliness, and so getting it out. I understand we want to spread this out. We don't want to, give it all out in, week one because we got to make sure businesses continue to get help throughout the next several months. But that initial infusion of dollars is greatly needed, and so timeliness is very important. So I absolutely understand why we want to use existing infrastructure in the process, and people that already have a process for reviewing grants applications, and so I think that is supportable, and we should utilize that to get this timeliness of funds out to the businesses in need. But I do also have a concern, again, and why I agree with the chair in that we need to have a county representative on these entities because we need to make sure there is a fair and equitable distribution throughout the entire county for our businesses because some of these are generally more of a regional regional area, make sure that we have representation, because the last thing I do not want people saying Commissioner Gonzalez or anybody on this commission is funneling dollars to a certain entity or a certain this and that. So once the money starts going out, I believe we need to have a hands-off approach, make sure this is fair. We are not doing anything that looks odd, and which is why I appreciate the transparency and any oversight. But I absolutely want to have a county representative on those boards so that we can make sure the entirety of the county gets the opportunities at the grants.
Completely agree, and please know that we are also committed to bringing back economic impact report data to you all to show that distribution in a fair way.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, the other item on this slide that I didn't speak to earlier is the $4 million for the workforce development side of economic development. So that is the money that has been requested to get our population back to work. There's an initiative to allow additional training to happen. Tracy Marquez with the Pikes Peak Workforce Center is going to stand up a pop-up, which he's calling a pop-up site, to allow people to come there, apply for the unemployment benefits, get training, looking at vocational training for people who weren't able to complete that in the high schools, things like that, to get our citizens back to work. So overall, we're really excited about not necessarily this slide, but the initiatives on this slide. Financial services is requesting a total of $578,000. A lot of those are, administrative items. We need some temporary positions to handle paying all of this money by the end of the year. Some PPE for partitions and for staffing. Some reconfiguration of workspaces to allow for better physical distancing. We also have a need for an accounts payable automation project in which we would be able to utilize our remote workforce in still processing our accounts payable in a timely manner, as well as Dropbox at regional for allowing employees to apply for benefits through physical distancing. Also, a similar idea with a website for virtual bid openings. As we normally have a process where a lot of people come together in a small room to open bids together, we need to come up with a better solution to that while we have COVID-19. And also, being able to implement credit cards countywide, there's an expense to that, of buying the machines, things like that. And so departments that currently can't accept credit cards, we have a plan to be able to get them there so that citizens can interact with the county more remotely. Our Facilities and Infrastructure Department has a similar request for the parking garages. That's a significant investment to be able to allow the automated readers at our garages. We kind of have an old school system there now, so we'd like to upgrade that. As well as a lot of the projects that you're hearing about have a facilities component. And so in order for the facilities department to get through the rest of the year, they need 2 temporary project managers. They also have been our lead for kind of getting PPE. They've been doing an amazing job, Brian Olson and his group, making sure that we get the supplies, the cleaning supplies, the PPE that we need, and all of that is funneled through the facilities department, so reimbursing for that.
Just one question.
Yep, Commissioner Williams.
Courthouses, are they part of our responsibility, or is the state supposed to take care of the courthouse? Or is it a hybrid?
Sorry, Commissioner?
Yeah, we'll go ahead if you've got the answer, or I can help if you need.
So if you want to go ahead.
Yep, so.
I can help too if needed, sorry. Diana May, County Attorney.
Buildings are ours, people are theirs, for the most part, with the exception of security. Security is also ours.
Human Resources, they have asked for a small amount of money to, well, I don't mean small, but temporary staff to allow their personnel files to become paperless. They've relied on a paper system for years and would like to get that paperless so we can work remotely, and as well as a similar workspace configuration. Our Department of Human Services, there's a lot of people in the Department of Human Services, staff-wise and client-wise, and it's going to take a significant investment in order to get that to be physically distanced and allow those critical functions to continue. So $2.25 million would include moving the eligibility lobby to the first floor of the Citizen Service Center, moving the visitation center to a place that can allow visitation in a physically distanced manner, the center grandfathering, as well as changing the cubicles to allow for remote access when we have over 600 people in that department in the third floor of Citizen Service Center. In addition, we're being asked to provide possible quarantine beds for youth in foster care, and that cost is $50,000. So overall, $3.05 million has been requested by the Department of Human Services. Our information technology department has kind of been our unsung heroes behind the scenes, doing an amazing job getting us all the ability to work from home on a very quick basis. They kind of were ahead of the game, starting the orders in early March, and we have spent $1.4 million to date. Overall, through the year, we anticipate about $2.5 million in expenditures to allow remote access, and that includes laptops, servers, docking station, additional firewall capabilities, conferencing softwares. We're currently streaming on a conferencing software. So $2.5 million for them. Emergency management is requesting $75,000 for supplies for each wave, or each presumed wave of this, for a total of $150,000, and then $100,000 for their overtime and other expenses related to COVID-19. Obviously, public health is a huge part of this, and their ongoing response efforts, we estimate, are going to total about $4 million. Those are 100% allowable underneath the coronavirus relief funds. In addition, they have identified a specific need to increase communications with the citizens to understand any public health orders or anything that's going on, and make sure they're getting the correct information. As we know, there's a lot of misunderstood information out there, and we want to make sure we're getting the correct information to our citizens. Then a mental and behavioral health component for community and staff. We're working with the National Alliance on Mental Illness to ensure that the mental health side of this is addressed, and we can do what we can to help our community. And so we are allocating $200,000 to that effort, as well as the $4 million, the bottom line of public health. Public health is requesting the ability to have a permanent presence in Southeast El Paso County to service that community that is hard hit from the COVID-19, not just the public health side of things, but the economic side of things, and want to make sure that we get a presence down in that area of town. So total $8.3 million for our public health department. Public Information Office, they have requested $200,000 to replace AV and booth equipment to be able to stream meetings better. We have some older equipment handling that. It's kind of at capacity at the moment, so we're trying to increase servers and other IT equipment to be able to increase that ability, as well as temporary staffing, as our PIO office has been overloaded the last few months in an unsustainable format. Our Public Works Office is requesting a total of $2.165 million. That is primarily, the bottom line is additional trucks to separate crews. Right now we have a lot of staff on the same truck when they go out to do a job. And so our Public Works Office has identified $1.5 million in needs for pickup and heavy fleet to ensure that we continue to do our jobs, but in a physically distant and safe way, as well as portable offices for Callahan and Acres that will allow crews to check in and do things there without coming into a mass meeting every morning. And that idea follows for that first line, which is equipment and devices for vehicles, to allow for task mission assignments instead of in-office briefings, and be able to use our Chrono system, which is our timekeeping system, for $150,000. So all of that combined, $2.165 million is the request from Public Works. And then our Sheriff's Office has some significant needs, and obviously expected that our Sheriff's Office would have needs this level. $13.6 million we are recommending to be allocated to the Sheriff's Office, which includes a property conveyor in their intake area, which would allow greater security or less touching of inmates' items when it comes in. Jail security cameras and door control system, we've seen in the news, and other things that we are looking at the door locks and security systems, so the total of those two items just being over $6 million. We need greater physical distancing and security in the jail lobbies and lockers, so that reconfiguration is $2.2 million. A similar idea with the training facility remodel, allowing our training for our deputies to continue. We can't stall that forever, so we need to figure out a way to remodel that facility in a way that physical distancing and better security can be there. We need to upgrade some equipment for sanitation and hygiene for $300,000. Increase our telemedicine equipment for the inmates at $250,000. The visitation booths remodel would be $250,000. As well as the sheriff has identified that our deputies are in a hazardous situation every day and has requested $1.16 million to provide them hazardous duty pay as an addition to their check while COVID-19 is a public health emergency. And as well as other departments, an update to offices and cubicles at $500,000. And overtime costs of $200,000. Redeployment of our school resource officers for $125,000, and redeployment of our work release deputies, $487,500, and a shared video court program for $26,000. And all of these items we have fully vetted to ensure that they're COVID-19 related, and they are, and we're recommending we use CARES dollars to do these. And the last department, but definitely not least, is our county treasurer, and he has requested $8,600. Pretty low maintenance guy.
Denied.
He'd like a drop box to allow citizens to interact with his office without actually coming in if that's how they prefer, as well as PPE for his staff and his customers. So that is everything that I had to go through in detail. I'd love to open it up for any questions, if there are any questions of me.
Any questions? No. Very thorough, thank you. Yeah, and I said this to you on the phone the other day, but I wanted to say it for the public record. You guys did a tremendous job putting this whole package together. I know it was an incredibly daunting task for you to do, and I've heard you say. I've heard you say many times how after, we've done something here, you've said that you've been proud to be a county employee. Well, seeing all the work that you all put into this one makes me proud to be a county employee, so thank you very much.
I appreciate that, Commissioner. I think it's been a huge team effort. Sherry Cassidy, our CFO, and our whole budget team has been working with every director. Every director's been working incredibly hard and elected officials are working incredibly hard to make sure that we use this money appropriately, to make sure that we're going to be able to spend it by the end of the year. It's a lot of money to be able to spend with a December 30th deadline, but we will get it done and do the right thing for our community and citizens.
Thank you. Excellent work.